Watership Down, Part 4, Hazel Raw, Chapter 39, The Bridges. On almost any other river, Blackberry's plan would not have worked. The boat would not have left the bank, or if it had, it would have run aground or been fouled by weeds or some other obstruction. But here, on the Test River, there were no submerged branches and no gravel spits or beds of weeds above the surface at all, and from bank to bank, the current, regular and unvaried, flowed as fast as a man strolling. The boat slipped downstream smoothly, without any alteration of the speed, which it had gained within a few yards of leaving the bank. Most of the rabbits had very little idea of what was happening. The Afraffin does had never seen a river, and it would certainly have been beyond Pipkin or Hawkbit to explain to them that they were on a boat. They, and nearly all the others, had simply trusted Hazel and done as they were told. But all of them, bucks and does alike, realized that Woundwort and his followers had vanished. And wearied by all they had gone through, the sodden rabbits crouched without talking, incapable of any feeling but a dull relief, and without even the energy to wonder what was going to happen next. That they should feel any relief, dull or otherwise, was remarkable under the circumstances, and showed both how little they understood their situation and how much fear General Woundwort could inspire, for their escape from him seemed to be their only good fortune. The rain still fell, and already they were so wet they could no longer feel it. They were nevertheless shivering with cold and weighted down with drenched fur. The boat was holding over half an inch of rainwater. There was one small floorboard, and this was now floating, and some of the rabbits, in the first confusion of boarding the boat, had found themselves sitting in this water, but now all had got clear of it, most either to one end of the boat or the other, although Thethuthanang and Speedwell were hunched together on a narrow piece of wood in the middle of the boat. In addition to their discomfort, they were exposed and helpless, and finally there was no way of controlling the boat, and they did not know where they were going. But these last were troubles beyond the understanding of everyone, except for Hazel, Fiver, and Blackberry. Bigwig had collapsed beside Hazel and lay on his side, exhausted. The feverish courage had left him, the courage which had brought him from Ephrafa to the river, and his wounded shoulder had begun to hurt badly. And in spite of the rain and the throbbing pulse down his foreleg, he felt ready to sleep where he was, stretched out on the planks. He opened his eyes and looked up at Hazel. "I couldn't do that again, Hazel," he said. "You don't have to," replied Hazel. "It was touch and go, you know," said Bigwig. "It was a chance in 1,000. "Ha! Our children's children will hear a good story," answered Hazel, quoting a rabbit proverb. "How did you get that wound? It's a nasty one." "I fought a member of the council police," said Bigwig. "A what?" The term Auslaffa was unknown to Hazel. "A dirty little beast like Hoofsa from that story," said Bigwig. "Did you beat him?" "Oh, of course, or I wouldn't be here. I should think he's going to stop running. I say, Hazel, we've got our dose. What's going to happen now?" "I don't know," said Hazel. "We need one of these clever rabbits to tell us. And Kihar, where's he gone? He's supposed to know about this thing we're sitting on." Dandelion, crouching beside Hazel, got up at the mention of clever rabbits, and made his way across the puddled floor of the boat, and returned with Blackberry and Fiver. "Well, we're all wondering what to do next," said Hazel. "Well," said Blackberry, "I suppose we shall drift into the bank before long, and then we'll all climb out of the boat and find some cover. There's no harm, though, in going a good long ways from those friends of Bigwig's back there." "There is," said Hazel. "Look at us. We're stuck here in full view, and we can't run anywhere. If a man finds us, we're in trouble." "Men don't like rain," said Blackberry, "and neither do I, if it comes down to it. But the rain makes us safer for now." And at this moment, Hyacinth lay, sitting just behind him, startled, and looked up. Excuse me, sir, for interrupting you," she said, as though she were speaking to an officer in Ephrafa. "But that bird, that white bird, it's coming towards us." And Kihar came flying up the river through the rain, and landed on the narrow edge of the boat, and the does nearest to him backed away nervously, Mr. Hazel, he said, Bridge come. You see him, Bridge? It had not occurred to any of the rabbits that they were floating beside the path upon which they had traveled earlier that evening, before the storm broke. They were on the opposite side of the hedge of plants along the bank, and the whole river looked different from here. But now they saw, not far ahead, the bridge which they had crossed when they first came to the Test River 4 nights before. This they recognized at once, for it looked the same as it had from the bank. Maybe you go under him, maybe not, said Kihar, but you sit there is trouble. The bridge stretched from bank to bank between two low footings. It was not an arched bridge. Its underside, made of iron beams, was perfectly straight, parallel with the surface of the water, and only about 8 inches above it. And just in time, Hazel understood what Kihar meant. If the boat did not pass under the bridge without getting stuck, it would do so by no more than the width of a rabbit's claw. And any creature above the level of the side of the boat would be struck and perhaps knocked into the river. He scuttled through the warm water on the bottom of the boat to the other end and pushed his way up among the wet-crowded rabbits. Get down on the bottom! Get down on the bottom! He shouted. Silver, Achbet, all of you, don't worry about the water down here. You and you and you, what's your name? Oh, you're Blackavar. Okay, get on the bottom, like everyone else. Be quick. And like Bigwig, he noticed that the Ephraim rabbits obeyed him at once. He then saw Kihar fly up from his perch and disappear over the wooden rails of the bridge, and the concrete footings projected from each bank, so that the narrow river ran slightly faster where it traveled under the bridge. The boat had been drifting broadside, but now one end of the bridge swung forward, so that Hazel lost his directions and found that he was no longer watching the approaching bridge, but staring at the riverbank. And as he hesitated, the bridge seemed to come at him like a dark mass, like snow sliding from a branch. He pressed himself to the bottom of the boat, and there was a squeal, and a rabbit tumbled on top of him. And then a heavy boom vibrated the length of the boat, and its smooth flow was paused. This was followed by a hollow sound of scraping. It grew very dark, and a roof appeared very low above him, and for a moment Hazel had the vague idea that he was underground. And then the roof vanished, and the boat glided on, and he heard Kihar calling. They were now below the bridge, and still drifting downstream. The rabbit who had fallen on him was Acorn. He had been struck by the bridge, and the blow had sent him flying. However, though dazed and bruised, he seemed to have escaped injury. I wasn't quick enough, Hazelrod, he said. I guess I'd better go to Ephrafa to learn how to behave. Oh, you'd be wasted there, said Hazel. But I'm afraid there's someone at the other end of the boat who wasn't so lucky. One of the does, who had held back from crowding onto the bottom of the boat, and the upstream girder under the bridge had caught her across the back. It was plain that she was terribly injured. But how badly it was, Hazel couldn't exactly tell. He could see Hyacinth lay beside her, and it seemed to him that since there was nothing he could do to help, it would probably be best to leave them alone. And he looked around at his bedraggled, shivering comrades, and then at Kihar, who sat spruce and brisk on the stern of the boat. We ought to get back onto land, Kihar, he said. But how can we do it? Rabbits were not meant for this, you know. You not stop boat. But again, there's not a bridge more. He stop boat. And there was nothing to do now but wait. They drifted on and came to a second bend in the river, where the river curved towards the west. The current did not slacken, and the boat went around the bend, almost exactly in the middle of the stream, but slowly turning as it did so. The rabbits had been frightened by what had happened to Acorn and to the doe, and remained squatting miserably, half in and half out of the water on the bottom of the boat. Hazel crept back to the bow of the boat and peeked over. The river had broadened, and now the current slackened. He realized that they had begun to drift more slowly. The nearer bank was very high, and the trees stood close and thick. But on the other side, the ground was low and open, grassy, and it stretched away, smooth as a mown field on top of Watership Down. And Hazel realized and hoped that they might somehow drop out of the current and reach that side of the river, but the boat moved quietly on, down the very center of the broad pool, and the open bank slipped by, and now the trees towered on both sides. Downstream, the pool was broken by the second bridge, of which Kihar had spoken. It was old, built of darkened bricks, and ivy trailed over it, and valerian and creeping mauve toadflax, and well out from either bank stood 4 large arches, scarcely more than culverts, each filled by the stream to within a foot of the top, and through each of them thin segments of daylight shone through from the downstream side. The piers of the bridge did not project, but each lay against each lay a little accumulation of leaves and branches, from which driftwood and sticks continually broke away to be carried through the bridge. It was plain that their boat would drift up against the bridge and be held there by the current, and as it approached, Hazel dropped back to the bottom of the boat, but this time there was no need. Broadside, the boat struck gently across 2 of the piers supporting the bridge and stopped, pinned squarely across the mouth of one of the culverts. It could go no further. They had floated not quite half a mile in just over 15 minutes, and Hazel put his forepaws on the low side of the boat and peeked gingerly upstream. Immediately below, a shallow ripple spread all along the waterline where the current met the edge of the boat. It was too far to jump to shore, and both banks were steep. He turned and looked above him. The bricks were sheer, with a projecting course of bricks halfway between him and the top of the bridge. There was no way to scramble up that way. "Oh, what's to be done, Blackberry?" he asked, making his way to the bow of the boat. "You got us on this thing. Now, how do we get off?" "I don't know, Hazelraw," replied Blackberry. "Of all the ways we could finish up, I would never have thought of this. It looks as though we're going to have to swim." "Swim?" said Silver. "I don't like it, Hazelraw. I know it's not far, but look at those banks. The current would carry us down before we could get out, and that means into one of these holes under the bridge." Hazel tried to look through the arch. There was very little to be seen. The dark tunnel was not long, perhaps not much longer than the boat itself. The water looked smooth. There seemed to be no obstructions, and there was room for the head of a swimming animal between the surface of the water and the top of the arch. But the segment was so narrow that it was impossible to see exactly what lay on the other side of the bridge, and the light was failing. Water, green leaves, moving reflections of leaves, the splashing of raindrops, and some curious thing that appeared to be standing in the water and made of vertical gray lines. These were all that could be made out, and the rain echoed dismally through the culvert, the hard ringing noise from under the soffit, so much unlike any sound to be heard in an earth tunnel underground, was disturbing to the rabbits. Hazel returned to Blackberry and Silver. "Well, this is as bad as any problem we've been in," he said. "We can't stay here, but I can't see the way out." Kihar appeared on the edge of the bridge above them. He flapped the rain out of his wings and dropped down to the boat. "It's finished boat," he said. "No wait more." "But how do we get to the bank, Kihar?" said Hazel. The gull was surprised. "Dogs swim? Rats swim? You know swim?" "Yes, we can swim, as long as it's not very far. But the banks are too steep for us, Kihar. We wouldn't be able to stop the current from pulling us through one of these tunnels, and we don't know what's at the other end." "Is gut, you get out fine." And Hazel felt at a loss. What exactly was he to understand from this? Kihar was not a rabbit. Whatever the big water was like, it must be worse than this, and Kihar was used to it. He never said much in any case, and what he said was always restricted to the simplest, since he spoke no Lapine. He was doing them a good favor, because they had saved his life. But, as Hazel knew, he could not help despising them for the timid, helpless, stay-at-home creatures they were, who couldn't even fly. He was often impatient with them. Did he mean that he had looked at the river and considered it from the point of view of a rabbit?